Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast, Securing the Future with Microsoft Defender for the Cloud, Best Practices and Insights, sponsored by Microsoft. My name is Mary Lynn Gollier of SANS. Today's featured speakers are Dave Shackleford, SANS Analyst and CEO of Voodoo Security, and Dick Lake, Senior Product Manager at Microsoft. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the Q&A window at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to our presenters.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much. And thanks everybody for joining us here today. I'm very excited to be joined by Dick. Dick, welcome. Glad to have you here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So this should be a fun one. There's lots of cool stuff to talk about. And I sort of love the title. We're defending the future. For some of you, it's very much defending the present as well. So we're not getting ahead of ourselves here. We're certainly going to be talking about things that are wholly relevant to many organizations right now. But I do think it's interesting to look forward as well as we're getting into this stuff. So we got a big agenda, right? So we're going to be talking about Microsoft Defender for Cloud. And, really, there's so many really interesting aspects of that platform that, we probably don't even do it justice in this breakdown of an agenda, but we're going to do our best, right? We're going to try to hit at least some of the categorical high points as we get into it. And again, I'm super excited to have Dick here because he knows all the ins and outs of the platform. And I'm really here to just sort of drive what's going on out there, and certainly what we saw during our SANS review, which I will get here to momentarily. So let me kick us off. And look, this, if you've ever hung out with me on any of these types of webcasts, I tend to, at this point, it's probably more of a joke, but I tend to always start off with what I refer to as the Captain Obvious slide. And this is most certainly that slide, because I think we all kind of know this. We're setting the stage. You get it. I get it. We get it. But, there was a period of time so I've been teaching classes for SANS for a long time, and in particular, cloud security classes. And I started teaching these classes I'd go so far as to say 2010, 11, 12, ancient history days, way back in the day. And I remember that people would come to my classes and, a lot of them were just sort of starting to dip their toe into the water of cloud, right? Like, okay, hey, we're doing a little lift and shift. We're kind of dabbling a bit, which makes all the sense in the world, especially as organizations were just becoming accustomed to, particularly things like infrastructure as a service. Hey, it's a virtual machine over here. Well, why not have it as a virtual machine over here? Cool. Okay. Makes sense. Those things make sense. And then gradually they start seeing these efficiencies. And of course, the rumblings about all of their competitors going to cloud, and they start going, well, we probably need to do a little more cloud and get more into this. And so again, fast forward a couple of years, but I remember, and there's a whole point to this, I promise. I remember when students, early in the day would come and say, yeah, we're using multiple clouds, right? Or we're using all these different services. And maybe this was me being naive back in the day, but I was like, are you crazy? What are you thinking there, right? Multi-cloud, what even is that? And boom, here we are today. And, look, people are using cloud in so many forms and so many varieties with so many varied types of services that it's a core and sort of, critical element of just about everybody's infrastructure in various ways. And so here we are, that's what we're talking about. But what's come with that naturally is the realization that many of the traditional security tools of the past, right? Security tools, security controls, capabilities that we relied upon just aren't well suited for cloud. Some of them will make the journey with you, and that's probably fine. But there's quite a few that won't. And I found that security teams are really rapidly coming to that conclusion. We really can't rely on some of these, sort of heavy-handed tools that were largely built for traditional on-premises infrastructure. It just doesn't work the same, right? The cloud fabric is different. The assets that we have in the cloud are different. There are performance and efficiency issues that we have to take into consideration. And so, sure, thematically, we may be talking about a lot of the same things. We're talking about configuration management for assets. We're talking about protecting workloads and making sure that they don't get compromised or that they're not built poorly or exposed perhaps in ways that we didn't want them to be. We have operational concerns and aspects about this where we're saying, hey, wait a minute, there's all sorts of interesting things going on while applications are operating within those workloads. Are we protecting that context here as well in the runtime sense? Making sure that our pipeline operations are protected. So, things are moving much faster than they ever have. This is a desirable trait for most organizations, right? We're able to build things quicker. We're able to deploy them quicker. We're able to do more than we ever have been. But with that comes the need to ensure that we're protecting all the varied elements and aspects of that pipeline. And then, to put a bow on top of it all for the security teams, make sure that we know what the heck is going on, ideally everywhere, all the time. Okay, there we are, right? So look, if again, to sort of wrap up my Captain Obvious slide, a lot of this should sound familiar, right? I mean, conceptually sounds familiar, but, well, things have changed. So I'm going to kick off my intro to the review, and then we're going to get into it and really start talking about the fun stuff, which is all the varied parts of Microsoft Defender for Cloud, which is in fact a very full-featured CNAPP solution, right? Yet another Gartnerism that was foisted upon us, but hey, this one's going to stick. So CNAPP, we got it, right? Cloud Native Application Protection Platforms. But I almost think that name is a bit misleading in some ways because it does a lot more. I think if you don't know what that means, and today most of you, I'm guessing, probably do, but that name sort of implies that it's just centric to applications. Not really, right? There's a lot more that goes on in there. And so there's a ton of features, lots of different things to love. And we were fortunate enough to have the opportunity with the Microsoft team to set up some environments with Microsoft and basically go through the full gamut and really, sort of get in, kick the tires, as it were, and see lots and lots of cool stuff. So with that, I think that's probably a good way to jump right in, Dick, and talk about lots of the things that Microsoft has to offer in here. And I think we started with this topic, right, or theme, cloud security posture management, because it's one that I would say is a relatively mature concept, right? People get this one. And I will tell you, the thing that I found working with lots of clients, because I do, these assessments of people's cloud environments, the sad truth of the matter is that sometimes the complexity gets away from people. And we're sort of our own worst enemy a lot of times. It's not always these evil, attackers of the world that are out there. It's us just doing stuff too fast, making mistakes. But in a large scaled environment, you may not realize it, right? You may not even know that somebody's made a mistake or deployed something or that you've made a configuration error. And so I look at cloud security posture management as, if you'd asked me this 5 years ago, I might have said, hey, for a lot of organizations, it's kind of a nice to have. I don't feel that way anymore. I feel like it's kind of a need to have, especially as your deployments get bigger. Are you seeing that from customers that people that you're talking to, that it's sort of become a core element of a lot of organizations' cloud security just strategy and architecture overall?
100%. So I liken the posture management aspect to the eat your veggies of information security. Like no one wants to do it. However, that's how you stay healthy. A lot of focus on the incident response and finding patient zero. And I do not mean to take away from individuals who do that work. I cannot. I just don't have that brain capacity. Uh, but I don't want to be good at the reactive stuff. I want us to be good at the proactive. And that's where that posture management piece comes into play. Uh, I was talking to one of my buddies on Microsoft's incident response team that goes out and helps customers. Uh, and they track certain statistics, and about 95% of their engagements uh, either start with or are, shall we say, severely escalated by a simple misconfiguration. That could be a misconfiguration of something in the cloud. It could be a misconfiguration of something on their domain controller uh, or their on-prem AD environment. But bottom line, it's something that could have been assessed. Maybe it was assessed and forgotten about, deprioritized, or just skipped. But it's that posture management thing that kind of helps you prevent not having to be the greatest IR or have the greatest IR team at all times.
Right there with you, right? So it's funny because so at SANS we sort of had this whole mantra that bubbled up over the years. Gosh, I don't remember when it all started, but it was like, look, you know, everybody needs to get in the mindset that you do your best on the protection and prevention side, but you better be ready on the detection and response side too,
Yeah.
right? Which is just prudent guidance, right? That's prudent
Yeah.
guidance. But I found this moment, this inflection point. I really like the way that you said that, right? Like, okay, look, and I don't know when this was either the last, 10 years or something, but it felt like people were sort of giving up on prevention or on the protection side. Like, yeah, we just, we're doomed to fail. Let's just assume that and put all of our eggs in the detection and response baskets. And I'm like, no, absolutely not. I feel pretty strongly that we should not be giving up on the preventative
No,
aspects of any of this by any stretch of the imagination. But I think especially in big, like widely dispersed cloud environments, that's a daunting task, right? Just knowing what's happening and being able to look at this and
absolutely.
say, hey, here's where you need to go right now, right? Here is your problem, or here are your problems that need immediate attention, like
Yeah. And
collectively across all of it.
I mean, that they're that doing the posture management stuff in advance is hard, like 100%. Like it is much harder. You have things like DevOps, and developers can just create an Azure account or subscription, an AWS account, and just start deploying things in there till their heart's content. Uh, I can deploy 1,000 servers in under 10 minutes. Like as a centralized security team, that's really hard to stay on top of. Uh,
Agreed.
and it's something that you know, we're we're very well aware of this problem, and so we're trying to shift things further to the left so we can fix things early. Let's say if it was an infrastructure as code, uh, you guys use infrastructure as code to deploy all your environments. Cool, great. Uh, we can assess, are those infrastructure as code templates using the best practices? Are they, deploying these storage accounts willy-nilly and unsecure? Uh, if yes, well, that's a problem. And we want to fix it in that infrastructure as code template. So we don't have to play whack-a-mole in runtime at prod, trying to find out, okay, who owns this storage account? Can we make this change right now and submit the change ticket and change request and then that go through and have to have a rollback panel and all that fun stuff? Like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to fix it once for all of 10,000 of my storage accounts or whatever resource it may be.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and look, I'm a sucker for a good dashboard. I have absolutely no problem admitting this, just because I've worked in SOCs, I've worked in organizations where seconds matter, minutes matter. If I can see everything I need to see quickly and know where to go to get more detail, that really is a lifesaver. This particular dashboard for CSPM within Defender for Cloud, I think it gives you a lot of good insights. And by the way, I sort of love this particular screenshot just because I put myself in the shoes of somebody that had this actual subscription and looked at this, and it would be horrifying. There's a lot of red in here.
Yep.
You got critical. If you look at your inventory, the majority of that is unhealthy. And hey, look, if this is where you start, at least it gives you some place to go. But I think, looking at this now, I laugh a little bit and go, yeah, you've got a lot of work to do. If this is the first thing that greets you, what's going on in there, right?
Yeah, but I think the thing I like, and how my brain kind of flows as I go through this, like, yeah, so in your subscription you had 327 resources, and what, 244 were unhealthy. And we can break that down into the criticals, highs, mediums, lows. But you just had one subscription with a small handful of resources, if we're being honest. Uh, Enterprises will have hundreds, if not thousands, of subscriptions with just uh, a metric ton of resources. And so recommendation fatigue is a real problem. Like it's something we actively monitor behind the scenes to see, like, is this recommendation being actioned? Like, if not, why? Is it because it's unclear? Is it because we're not, putting it visible enough? Like we go out and we ask these questions to customers. Uh, and oftentimes I have 10,000 things you're telling me I need to fix. I can't I can't process that. And so, we took that feedback to heart. And now what we have are this concept of attack paths, which are just combinations of recommendations that an attacker could use to exploit your way into the environment. So say internet exposed virtual machine with high severity vulnerabilities. Oh, great. Next slide. Uh, uh, Internet exposed virtual machine with high severity vulnerabilities allows connection to, let's say, a storage account with sensitive data. Exactly like it is on the screen. Great. Um, like that then gives me the ammunition I need as a security admin to go, okay, I need to fix this. I may not own that resource. I may not have permissions to change that thing. Uh, but I can find the person who does and be like, look, Bob, you need to take action on this. Here's why. And give that security architect or admin all of the ammunition they need to get it fixed.
Well, yeah, and so this was definitely one of my favorite features. Just being totally honest here. Transparency is important, right? But because I look at this from my entire career as a security professional, and two things immediately come to mind. Number one, the number of times I've had senior executives say, well, what does that mean to us?
Yeah.
Right. So like me coming and saying, hey, look, wow, things are broken. Okay.
Yeah.
Broken how? All right. And I can explain that in whatever level of detail, but what does it mean for us? And that's a much, much harder question. It's the right question. It's the one that they should be asking. But if you can't articulate that as a security analyst or an engineer or a cloud security engineer, whatever your title might be,
Yeah.
if you can't come and say, well, look, yeah, this thing is bad. We need to fix it. But if it has a problem, these 7 other things could have a problem because of that interconnectedness of what's going on within the cloud. And the way the second thing that sort of drives is what I think of as I sort of call this what if analysis, right? It's the what ifs of, hey, look, count yourself lucky that maybe it hasn't been compromised yet, but if you don't do something about it, here's what that could lead to ultimately. And I think having that sort of visualization and being able to track those attack paths, you can show those to people and say, hey, look, this isn't me just making this up and trying to sell you a story here. This is exactly how these assets are interconnected. They're woven together through identity relationships or other things. And, a lot of people might not even understand that. It's sort of a nice visual threat model that people can take a look at and say, oh, wow, we didn't even realize that you could get from here to here to here. And that's probably not a good thing for us. Let's fix the problem, so that it doesn't happen to us.
Yeah. Yeah,
let me go to the next slide just because I just want to put that up on the screen so people can gaze upon the detail because I think that's important too. But go ahead, Dick, what were you going to say there?
Yeah, so there's the very often repeated defenders think in list, attackers think in graphs quote. And I would say, yeah, that was 100% true of Defender for Cloud years ago. Like we used to offer a very flat list of fix this, fix this, fix this. And it didn't provide contextualization in there. And so now with the attack paths and with Cloud Security Explorer, which I'm sure we'll look at in a minute or two, like you can start to apply that contextualization in those risk factors. And when we get into the Cloud Security Explorer thing, you can then start doing your own proactive hunting. Microsoft, we will enumerate this graph that we build behind the scenes for you all. But we can't replicate the knowledge of how your enterprise works, how your company works, or what things mean. I'll give you a simple example. Storage accounts can have a prefix that can mean something to you, like, other than say prod dev test, like, okay, cool. But, business codes that help you track down. And so when you're hunting through these environments, you can do some really complicated querying to get, exactly what it is you want and enumerate your way through that backend graph all by yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, I think the key word there is context. Because I think a lot of these sort of reporting aspects in the original days of Defender for Cloud, right? And I certainly spent time there too. They're useful. They tell you things,
Yeah.
but it feels a lot more sort of like a classic vulnerability scanner or something, right? Where it's just like, hey, these things have these problems. Cool.
Yep.
Okay. That is useful. But look, and actually I really like this slide, even though, contextually, not to steal that again, it's only a little snippet of this attack path, but we tried to sort of hone in on this so that everybody could just get a sense of, hey, look, there's a lot of really good details in here that helps figure this out. The number one Achilles heel for a lot of organizations that I work with is identity
Yeah.
and how identity functions in the cloud. And really, I sort of laugh because it's like, look, everybody gets the concept of identity, but there really is a mental shift that has to occur for cloud where you realize everything has an identity, right? It's all
Hmm.
software. It's all software infrastructure. Every single asset, every service, identities have identities, right? It's like they just proliferate and they proliferate quickly.
Yep.
And it's very easy to completely lose track of this stuff. And so a lot of organizations have found this. I've worked with security teams that are just absolutely overwhelmed by what that even really means to them in the context of potential security concerns. And I think you sort of overlaying this and putting some visualization and saying, hey, look, this has these permissions, that gives you even more impetus to go follow through and
Yep.
start digging in and saying, hey, look, there's a lot of things that we could learn about what's actually happening in the environment as well, versus just saying, hey, we have a security problem. We might be able to go talk to the stakeholders who built this stuff in the first place and say, is this how it should be built?
Yeah.
Right? Can we
Does
minimize some of
this
these
account
privileges?
even need it still? Yeah, because
Yeah.
that's another big problem that we see is, uh, there's over provisioned identities. I just want this to work, so I'm going to grant this thing owner, and they give it owner. And that, for the people I'm listening, do not do that. Do not be that person. They give it owner, and then they forget about it. It was a pet project. It dies. Uh, but the resource still lives on. It didn't get deleted. It just, became overcome by events. Uh, but that identity still lives. It still has owner. An attacker could eventually get to it, abusing the IMDS service. And now they've got control of your environment.
Well, yeah, and look, we've seen this movie before.
Yeah.
This is not a movie that has a great ending, I mean, I mean, yeah, it's like, the old days where it's like, wow, everything's so much easier to do if you're the root user, right? Or the
Yeah.
administrator. It's like, yeah, but you bring that into the cloud and that's
Yeah.
a
If I'm
problem that
domain
blows
admin, I
up.
can get all my stuff done.
Everything works. Yeah, it's
Everything
fantastic,
works.
right?
Oh,
It's yeah.
works on my computer.
Well, and look, the attack paths I think are an enormously helpful context. And speaking of incredibly helpful context as well, this was a place that I think is probably going to resonate with a lot of the people that are here with us today for reasons. One of the things that I tend to find is that much like identity, data tends to just absolutely blow up and proliferate in the cloud. Which is, hey, look, comparatively speaking, that's one of the real advantages of cloud is that you can do a lot
Yeah.
of very cool data analytic processing, and it's what we're building these days. You're building out machine learning. You're putting together these types of really cool capabilities to better inform your business and drive initiatives and all sorts of things. So, yep, the term AI. By the way, I have no problem admitting I was a skeptic about that term when it came out. And yep, that one's sticking too. Turns out, so we're going to have that for the foreseeable future. But look, these two are paired, right? So like AI is driven by large scale data processing and data sets of all various types. And lots of organizations of lots of different verticals and types are leveraging this, right? So healthcare companies, building out predictive models for patient outcomes. Pharmaceutical companies looking at accelerating clinical trial research. I mean, you could just keep this whole thing going.
Yeah.
There's so many really cool ways that this could just come into the mix, but there's also a ton of security concerns that could come in here.
Yeah.
And so, with all that data.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the data and AI dashboard. It was built to give, a security lens into your data estate. Like, your organizations probably will have data compliance officers and people with privacy titles and stuff like that. And uh, there's a whole set, there's the Microsoft Purview tool set there for that stuff, targeted for them. Do we leverage that engine? 100%. Yeah, we do. We just use it in a little different manner, but we do that so we can give security admins and architects or operators that lens into like, what is it I'm protecting? So if I get two alerts that say, hey, you got malware in your storage account, and, one is for a storage account that contains sensitive data and one's for not, like, I want you to triage the one that has sensitive data first. And so to help you, add that contextualization, that prioritization on what's going on in your environment. And on the AI side of the house, frequently I will have conversations with, security admins, CISOs, that persona group. And they just admit, like, I don't know what's going on right now. People are doing stuff. I'm responsible for securing it, but I don't know what. They don't talk to me. They don't ask my permission. They just go. And so that's why we have this, like, help me identify what AI services are in use. What models are we deploying? So I can bounce them off our, approved model list, hopefully. How is my grounding data being stored? Because, like, if an attacker were to ever compromise that, oh man, you're in for a very bad day.
Yeah. That's garbage in, garbage out, pretty much by definition, right? I mean, that's the point. So yeah, it's funny. I had a former client of mine. It was a CISO who was retiring. This was about a year and a half ago. And he said, I am so glad I'm retiring before this AI thing gets bigger. And I said, that's great for you. The rest of us, we're still here. Yeah, right. So we got to,
yes, thanks.
We got to contend with this, right? So to the point that Dick just made, this dashboard is intended to help give that lens, right? And look, where do I hone in? I'm going to look at, leading like security alerts. I'm going to look at resources that need some attention, places that I might not even know exist as a security team. And I need to go dig in and say, wow, okay, what is this? How did it get deployed? Why is it, throwing these alerts? But what I want to do is just show that this is all becoming much more interconnected within the Defender ecosystem here, right? Because, okay, you've got a dashboard, but you can click into those security alerts and it'll take you to a little more familiar place where you're saying, okay, wait a minute. I can see, number one, what the alerts are, but I can keep taking that even further, right? So I can basically look at this and say, okay, I've got what looks like a pretty legitimate attack attempt coming in here. So somebody's got access to this, or they're attempting to get access to this. What are they trying to get to? And you can see maybe it's, large scale database infrastructure or other, sort of data stores or storage accounts, things of that nature. But that's my starting point as a security organization. From an engineering standpoint, I can say, okay, what are we going to do about it? But number two, how do we respond? Is it a real threat? Does it look like maybe a false positive? Somebody misconfigured something. Yeah. You don't even know until you get down into the details of this. And so this is where you go, right? This is that next layer down to start digging in a little bit more.
And on some of the alerts, and I know it's the case with these 3 alerts because it helps with them, we provide the evidence. So like, when you do a suspected brute force attempt, like we will tell you, they tried this user at this time, and they did it, 10, 20, 30, however many times. Eventually we just stop counting and go, no more. So we don't,
yeah, exactly.
Spam the user, but yeah, we do that evidence. Same thing with the data and AI stuff, especially when we're talking about the security for AI threat protection. Because LLMs are, by its very nature, non-deterministic, we're going to give you the prompt that we received and go, this is what we got. We think it's suspicious because it's got Unicode characters in it, which probably shouldn't be here. It translates to this. You do with it what you will.
Right. Yeah, of course. But that's, great segue, because ultimately, you can come and look at this and say, looks bad. And look, I want to highlight, at least here before we move on, this concept of the in progress alert, right? This is happening as we speak, right? This isn't something that was observed. That's something that is observed right this moment. And depending on whatever the alert is, this might immediately become where you're pivoting in your day-to-day job, right? You may be going after this immediately and getting all hands on deck, depending on what it is, right? But you dig in a little bit, And, look, I'm a fan of good reporting and, as Dick just mentioned, having the actual telemetry. So you've got the evidence, you've got that there right in front of you. But at the end of the day, you might want to do something about it, right? And so to me, this was, again, one of my really favorite features within this particular area because you can immediately take action. So this isn't just an alerting and reporting engine. This is a full featured and comprehensive defense engine as well. And, depending on the circumstances, look, I think I'll speak for everybody that's a classic security person that's hanging out here with us today. You might have a career limiting move if you just go and start shutting stuff down and blocking things without getting a little bit more context around that. But you've got the context, and this at least gives you the options. And so I'm a fan of options. I like to see it. You got logs right there. So I can go dig in, see the logs, see exactly what's there versus just sort of the higher level distillation of that. But right below that, you can say, okay, how far do you want to take this, right? We can mitigate it right now, right? We can go in here and basically remediate the existing problem. So, you could basically cut off an account, or you could isolate a resource, something of that nature. But you can also prevent future attacks. So you have the ability to say, hey, look, let's, and this again goes back to the title of this webinar, right? You can say, well, here's the now, but I don't want to see this thing again, right? Like, let's make sure we prevent this from coming back our way. Mm-hmm. So you can go in, you can create remediation, alerting controls, workflows around this. You can have automated responses. If it turns out to be a false positive, it's like, oh, yeah, Dave wrote a script and it's bogus, which, by the way, has happened. This is a false positive. Let's just suppress this while we get it fixed. That happens too, but you have a lot of options here, and it's all in one place, which I just thought was handy. Okay, from there, let's talk a little bit more about some of the other telemetry here, right? And just the overall visibility. I mean, I think at the core, what we're saying is, hey, I need to know more. I need to be able to see more things that are going on within these environments. And I think this sort of gives it at least the high level of what some of that looks like. If I had one place that I kind of look back and say, just collectively over the course of my career, I wish I had had this capability in lots of places, just data exposure, right? In other words, what kind of data is it? I mean, this is a classic problem, I think, for just about every organization out there is what kind of data do I have and where is that data, right? And this is, I mean, it's been a problem for forever. Still is, right?
Yeah. What am I protecting? Why am I protecting it? It's an interesting thing. And I think people are going to have, the views that they naturally gravitate towards. If it's, attack paths and burning those down, great. If it's recommendations, if it's, taking a look at the data lens, like, great. There's also regulatory compliance where you can say, like, okay, I care about NIST, SP, whatever, and I want to focus on that. I don't think it's in the slides, but you can do that. And I think there's around 30 plus that, we strive to keep updated as NIST and all these other governing bodies make changes. And that could be the lens that you want to look at things through.
Well, I think that applies sometimes much more severely, sometimes just, even, hey, we've adopted this framework and we really want to align with it in whatever our reporting, just strategically. I love this bottom posture, sort of visibility screenshot and just the entire, sort of category within the platform itself. Because it took me a minute to notice it, by the way, when I was in there digging around. But once I did, I was like, wait a minute. They're calling it the BOM, right? AI BOM, right? Which is basically, here's all the components that make up your AI models, right? So this notion of a bill of materials is gaining a ton of traction because you're building things that are going to be applicable to others' data. You're going to start getting requests. Everybody has third parties and fourth parties and, turtles all the way down. But eventually somebody's going to come along and say, hey, you're doing this stuff with my data because I'm a customer of yours or I'm a partner of yours. What's inherent in that thing, right? What's in there? And sometimes people have absolutely no idea, which is terrifying. But the more you can, sort of bring that to the surface quickly and say, hey, yeah, look, here's the components that we're leveraging. within this model that we've built, and here's the storage components and all these services and things, and it's like boom, it's right there. I just thought that was super handy, right? And it's even framed within the context of what everybody's being driven to provide, or starting to be driven to provide. And I think that rolls right up to Dick, what you were saying a minute ago. I mean, there's a lot of discussion in the regulatory landscape of requiring some of that, especially if you're like a critical infrastructure provider, or you fall into some of those buckets. So this is only going to become more relevant. I think having that visibility is huge.
Yeah, we agree.
Well, yeah, obviously.
Way,
Yeah. So a question just came in. We might want to just
sure.
throw this one out. Is
saw it
if you want to. Yeah, I was going to say. I mean, I think it's a pretty good question. Can you highlight some of that by severity?
Yeah. Today, currently, no. What you can do is, does this contain sensitive data or not? And then you'll see what kinds, and then you can filter down by kinds. We don't rate, say, postal codes higher than credit card numbers. Are they different? Yeah, absolutely. I get it. Not all sensitive data is weighted the same. But let's see. There's some other questions in here. What is the requirement to assess AWS and Google? You have to connect us. Like, we cannot assess your AWS or GCP environments if we are not connected to them. So it will typically require elevated permissions on your AWS accounts or your GCP projects. And we'll give you a stack or a script to run in either of those environments, and it gets it set up. Do we support OCI? Not currently. Stay tuned. Let's see.
Good stuff.
License. So there's one question: is it a paid license or just a feature to activate? So there are two options you can do when it comes to posture management. There's the foundational tier, and that is free. That's in free 99. But it does not do a lot of the contextualization stuff that you see. So there isn't the agentless scanning of your virtual machines. There isn't the AI security posture management side of the house, the cloud identity entitlement management integration. So there are things that you will not get with the free tier. Then there's Defender CSPM, which is, the paid tier that you can onboard to. It's quite as simple as flicking one switch if you want all of them, and if you want to do some customizations, about 6 or 7 switches, just so you can toggle, I want this feature, I don't want that feature. So fairly straightforward.
Gotcha. This is good stuff. Yeah, this is pretty standard question fodder.
Yeah,
everybody wants to know. Does it hook in?
Licensing is critical.
It kind of is. Cool. Yeah. And hey, look, keep those questions coming, folks. It's great. That's what we're here for, right? Obviously to talk shop a little bit, but certainly to make sure that everybody gets a sense of what this is all about and how it's going to work for you. So let's move into one of my favorite topics, which I will tell you, it's become one of my favorite topics because it's also been an enormous headache for security teams. I would say more recently than not, right? Because it seems like just a couple of years ago, magically, everything has an API. And people are hooking them together, and you've got developers that are accessing them. And look, every developer on the planet wants API capabilities. It's just the nature of things. Yeah. But it's amazing how little visibility and insight security teams have historically had into not only what APIs they've got, talk about a just inventory problem, but what they do and how they can be attacked.
What does this API do? How frequently is it used? And then obviously there can be attacks riding over that API connection, very specifically targeted. Like, let's say you have an API endpoint that takes in a string and puts it into a SQL statement. Well, SQL injection can come this way. Cool, great. Yeah, the number of APIs that people have are, especially with Kubernetes blowing up, it's bewildering. And so getting visibility into them is it's a struggle. I'm going to be honest. We are reporting on APIs that are reporting into the API management service right now. Great. But what about those APIs that aren't? And, that's something that we're adding in the very near future is like, help me discover these APIs, not just the ones that like I know about or I could know about, but I just choose to ignore. But like really help me dig into all of these little data plane layers uh, and find me these API endpoints.
Yeah, and look, that's a headache because I think, if I've got a bunch of developers that I'm talking to and they're being honest, and that's an important caveat here. If I ask them, hey, do you know all of the APIs in use? They're going to say no, probably not.
No,
Yeah, right. And hello, exposure. Yeah. So I mean, that's the problem.
yeah.
Is you've got all these things that are there, but look, I do want to know the sort of attackability factor. I do want to know the kinds of bad things that are propagating out there. And
Yeah.
my experience has generally been if you expose an API, it's not going to take long for attacks to start showing up. Somebody's going to discover that, and somebody's going to start attacking it. And to the point, Dick, that you just made, what does that attack consist of? What's actually in there? What's the query? What's the response? What can I actually learn from this? Is it, yeah, to the point, is it,
Does
is
the
it,
API handle sensitive data?
yeah,
Like,
is it yeah,
on your screen, like you have some API endpoints. I don't know when you captured the image, but it looks like you have some that are receiving some threshold of traffic. It looks to be like a very small amount. Uh, and then you have others that, hey, I've never received traffic. And then about 30 days later, you took this screenshot and, hey, these things are all inactive. But I mean, these are all still endpoints that sit out in your environment that are, for lack of better terms, front doors into your environment uh, that you just have no visibility on.
yeah, yeah. What does it even mean, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I think, the sad truth of the matter is, I think people they get overwhelmed and sort of bewildered at what they're even looking at without having some additional level of detail to say, okay,
Yeah.
this is very clearly an injection attempt with JSON data or something, or, somebody's trying to manipulate a SQL query or something where you can go, okay, now I at least have a better sense of what this thing looks like. And
Yeah.
yeah, I would say knowing is half the battle when it comes to this, right? Because I mean, this is tied into attack tracking. And so, kind of coming back to this and saying, hey, look, again, we're sort of going down levels as we go through this. There's the dashboard. Here's your stuff. Here's, again, sort of that, high level. This might be something you want to go pay attention to. Then you can get into, sort of the next layer to say, okay, this looks like one that really needs to be investigated. And then, you can go in and say, okay, I want to get back to that level of detail within the attack context,
Mhm.
which, by the way, was pretty cool because it was also informed by some of Microsoft's built-in threat intel capabilities,
Yeah.
basically saying, hey, look, we've seen this before. This is something to pay attention to.
Yeah.
I always laugh because I'm like, think of the number of attacks Microsoft sees on a day-to-day basis.
Millions.
Distill that into
Millions.
this. Yeah, it's like it's just absurd. I want that
Yeah.
overlay, right? I want that overlay of intelligence.
And that threat intelligence isn't like that's something that is just provided with the product. Like you don't have to sign up for a separate threat intelligence license in this case. Is that something you can do? Yeah, absolutely. Go for it. Uh, but if we see something that looks funny, either it's coming from a funny place, like, by funny I mean suspicious, or funny I mean I have never seen somebody from this place try and connect to my database. Like that's just odd. You know, we're gonna let you know. It may be bad, it may not. Uh,
Yeah, but look, it's worth calling out, right? I mean, at least
yeah,
it's
I
worth
mean, you
calling out, and then you
violated a
can make.
statistical model, and a lot of these are machine learning based alerts, and something has violated the model. You should investigate it.
Yeah, exactly. And and again, in the context of APIs, my general sort of broad brush to paint here, security teams need all the help they can get. I'm just being honest, right? A lot of times they don't have that much knowledge about APIs. They don't have that much knowledge about, I mean, candidly, what some of the applications are even trying to do or whether they should be. And so, anything that you can sort of say, hey, look, you may not understand the full context of the API, but there's, it's talking to a bad neighborhood on the internet.
Hmm.
That alone should tell you to maybe go dig in a little bit
Yeah,
more.
perk your ears up a bit.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, like I said, anything helps to sort of drive that. So this is a feature that I spent a lot of time in, right? So certainly just speaking from my own review, going through the platform, because you can spend a lot of time here without too much trouble. And I think everybody's going to resonate with this one. I don't think that that this is complex to understand the value proposition and having it. It's your major search interface, right? To be able to go and look for things, right? Now, things, you get to define what that is. Is it a particular type of asset? Is it a particular status? And actually going back to Dick, what you mentioned earlier, let's sort of expand the context of this. We were in a test bed environment, we were playing around. And you're sort of deliberately introducing terrible, horrible things. But if you had that times 10,000 because you're a Fortune 100 company or something, and you've got to go say, oh my gosh, where do I even begin? I've got so many assets and so many things that are, flashing red at me. Where do I go to try to at least distill that into something that's a little bit more bite-sized chunk that I can work with? I'd say the answer is here, right? To me, Cloud Security Explorer was a really, and by the way, super easy to use interface. I'm a huge sucker for easy use, just because I've worked with things that aren't. And so without, and again, I just went in and stumbled around until I kind of figured it out. And I found I didn't have to stumble that far with this. So, it took me probably a good 15, 20 minutes to get a comfort level, which, I'll say, hey, look, speaking for anybody that's out there in a SOC or anybody that's out there doing threat hunting, any of you in all of those roles, this matters because you can figure out what you're doing and then, sort of upskill quickly. But it's your means of getting down to a distilled viewpoint, right? So there it is.
Yeah, we're big fans of this. I mentioned earlier, that we built a graph behind the scenes. We call it Cloud Map. It's getting integrated into the bigger picture Microsoft Security Graph. And that's the world's worst kept secret, by the way. So I didn't spoil anything. But this is your way to interrogate it. Like you set up all of these things in your environment. We're scanning them. We're building, all of these edges and nodes. Here's how you get to kind of navigate through that graph.
Yeah, and the thing that I liked too about this was that, hey, look, what you're looking at right now, this is an interactive query builder, thus the name. You go in, you go, I want to look for this thing right now. But if you come up with something in your queries that you say, look, I don't want to have to rebuild this the next time, you can templatize it. You can turn it into a pre-built query that you can just go in and say, run that one again. And so you don't have to go through this, iteratively every single time you go in, which every single security operations team on the planet is going to resonate with, right? You've got consistency. And so I think that's another important point. You spend a little time in here, you're going to find things of value. You're going to certainly find things that you want to be able to jump to quickly. And so I found it to be a super easy interface to use, really appreciated just the ability to dig in. We've got a couple minutes left. I want to make sure we're hitting some of these other features because there's so much in here. No, it's I knew this. I knew this was going to be a problem, Dick, coming into this. But look, DevOps security, it's the pipeline. It's all those other, everybody's heard the term shift left. And the reality is you kind of do have to look at that aspect of this too, because you've got to go back and say, okay, things that are being built as they're being packaged up and pushed down the pipeline for deployment, can we, back to the preventative conversation, can I catch that stuff early, right? Can I catch it in infrastructure as code templates as it's being built and say, hey, look, you don't have the proper access controls in here. You don't have the proper reference to, RBAC roles and assignments and things within there. Those are things that you can catch early and fix.
Yeah. Yeah, and so like a lot of, some of this builds on capabilities that come from GitHub Advanced Security or GitHub Advanced Security for Azure DevOps. Some of these just are part of it's called MSDO, the MSDO client that runs when you do your builds. And it's a great way to know, like, are there secrets? Just like, that's the worst thing. Like, are there secrets in this? Like, because if that gets posted, if that repo somehow gets toggled to public, uh, somebody's going to have my API keys to my Azure OpenAI service or my Bedrock. Like a bad day. Code findings. That's those are the code level sins that have been made. Dependency findings are obvious, like open source security packages. No one's building all of their libraries from scratch. I don't encourage that either. Like, use these open sources, but use the ones that are patched. It should be a part of your developers, kind of rhythm of business. Like, okay, there's a new version of LangChain. We need to update. We need to update. We need to test all that fun stuff. So yeah, super important.
Yeah, well, so the other thing that I like about this too, though, right, before we move on, what I think helps do, right, I've come to, a lot of organizations where, maybe the DevOps team and the security teams aren't always in sync. It gives you a common theme, right? So you have
Yeah.
the ability to have a conversation and it's not combative. It's like, hey, look, we're sort of making sure that everything you guys have is well secured as well. And these are the kind of dashboards that they can even benefit from, right? They want to know these kinds of things, right? I've never met a DevOps team that wanted to push bad things.
I would say
So
they
it's like,
probably already know these things. They just don't share them. Like, we're not trying to bring developers into the Defender for Cloud portal by any stretch of the imagination. Just as we're also not advocating that we take cloud security people and grant them unfettered access to the ADO repos or GitHub repos or JFrog and all these other different repositories that we support. But let's just take the results from each place and make sure that they're visible to both. So when we do talk, we're using the same numbers, the same language, the same, same.
yep, agreed. Yeah, and that's the point, right? Is, hey, look, we can see it.
Yeah.
It's right here, right? So this one I think will probably be a little bit more intuitive for the majority of people that are out there. It's workload protection, right? It's the things that are running, whether it's servers, whether it's containers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And well, I tend to find that most organizations have a mix, right? Certainly large enterprises usually have, sort of a broad mix of different workload types. Certainly if you're a brand new startup, you might be purely container based or, getting into things like Azure Functions, whatever. But no, most people have servers. You get storage. You got a bunch of different pieces and parts. And, for me, this one's, hey, just tell me what might be broken in here, right? Are they poorly configured? Are they unpatched? Do they have bad configuration elements to them that we can go and do something about, building a new image that we can then, sort of repurpose things? So this one felt pretty intuitive to me, but again, at scale, you need it. You need all this.
Yeah. Yeah, it just becomes a part of your report to management. Like, okay, well, we have 10,000 servers, boss, and only 9,000 of them are protected. And then that's going to spawn off a conversation like, what's going on with the other 1,000? Like, and it could be
Yep.
legitimate reasons, like, oh, well, they're running in OSs that are not supported.
Yeah.
Okay. But we just need to have that place to start having that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got all sorts of cool bells and whistles here, right? We didn't explore all those to a big layer, a level of depth, like file integrity monitoring. I mean, there's a whole lot of capabilities within that, depending on where you want to go with it. But I think that's part and parcel for any type of comprehensive workload protection platform. I mean, you're going to need those things in different contexts. And so there it is. That one, I think, like I said, that one seems to, sort of stand out as being pretty understandable. You want to just take 1 second and sort of, level up a little bit here in the bigger, broader security sense, because this is happening.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, I mean, it was like, everything was EDR or, it was like the MDR. And eventually these things started converging. This has been happening for years. But today, what we're realizing is that if those things are all being operated in silos and they can't speak to one another in any way, you don't have the operational capacity to deal with it all, especially in the cloud. And so XDR is sort of the next generation of all this, where you've got, some of the network aspects, you've got the workload aspects, but you've also got integration into the collective sort of security analytics and the fabric of how we figure out what to do about it all, which a lot of times for many organizations is something like a SIEM. But it's coalescing, right? And so for those of us that are trying to sort of move towards that next generation of security operations, which really is just about everybody, it's all about automation. It's all about building automation playbooks. It's all about making sure that everything possible can talk to one another in different ways. And it's trying to reduce that manual effort and operational headache that I think a lot of organizations have struggled with for years, right? And I guess maybe coming full circle, what I see with a lot of those integrations within Defender for Cloud and Microsoft XDR is you're really improving the performance and capability set of the SOC is what you're doing right here, right? And we definitely had a question that came in a long time ago, actually. It's like, hey, where are the headaches? Well, I'll just say for what we have here, I wouldn't even go so far as to call it a headache. It's a learning curve. For a lot of security professionals, especially on the operations side, they've got to get in and basically see how things hook together and start building out new playbooks that rely on new tools and new capability sets. And again, some of the automation capabilities that they haven't had at their disposal before. And what I always counsel people, I'm like, look, it's a lot of the work up front. When you do a deployment like this, I mean, that the heavy lift is at the beginning as you're learning it and starting to see where you can hook things together. But the payoff comes like all the way down the road after that, right? Because you're not going to be chasing stuff all over the place. And so, it's just good to be prepared. There you go. Anything you want to add there, Dick?
I definitely agree on the learning front. And I mean, this is, I'd say, true if you're doing the automation capabilities in Defender for Cloud, if you're doing it in Sentinel, if you're doing it in any platform. Like my recommendation remains the same. Pick one thing that really bugs you in life that you don't want to deal with anymore. I don't want to deal with phishing emails, or I don't want to deal with this thing. Okay, work out all of the cases. What do you do? Build the automation that does that, test it, launch it, and watch it for a while. And then once you're comfortable with that, great, repeat the process. What's the next most annoying thing? And to slowly work it down. I have worked with some customers who are like, all of these things annoy me and I don't want to see them anymore. And I'm like, you're going to have this is going to be a bad year. Because if you try and focus on all 50 of these problems, none of them will be solved. Focus on one, focus on two, then three, and start to slowly burn these down.
Yeah, agreed. And I've definitely seen that problem manifest when people try to boil the ocean at the beginning, like, oh, I've got this cool new thing. Yeah, let's make it all happen. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Do not.
think of the use cases. Think how you're going to provide the care and feeding for it. Like, how will you stay up to date when APIs change for a certain endpoint that you call in a logic app? Who owns it?
Exactly.
Like, come out with those RACI charts, all that fun stuff, and like do the work.
Yeah. Look, I don't want to give short shrift to the reporting. Sure. I sort of just tossed it in here at the end.
Man, you built that quick. Yeah. So there was a question on the regulatory compliance framework. So to the viewers, like, you can see it here on the screen right now. It would appear that we, in this environment, added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different regulatory compliance frameworks. So we have things from like NIST and CIS and AWS benchmarks and all those fun things that you can bring in and kind of see things by control groupings like network security or identity and access management, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, and like I said, reporting. Like I said, I don't want to sell it short. For a lot of organizations, it's right there at the top of the list of critical requirements. But I wanted to get through all the cool features before I sort of wrap this up. I mean, look, the reality is, lots of compliance frameworks, lots of industry sort of standards and frameworks and things for everything from just, configuration management and best practices all the way up to, hey, I really need to be able to tie this into my ISO initiative. You name it, it's all in there. And for different, people, that's going to be more and more important. But there's a lot to love here, right? I mean, like I said, just to finish my, points on this, I had a great time going through the review, and I never found myself like wandering. It was all real intuitive, and that's a big takeaway here. I think organizations could get up and running with this really fast, which is a huge advantage.
Glad you think so.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining me today here, Dick. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Dave and Dick, for your great presentation, and to Microsoft for sponsoring this webcast, which helps to bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.
Thanks, everybody.